The brass key turns in the lock with a small, satisfying click. The door swings inward. Warm air hits Odette Marchetti's face first, too warm, too alive for a house that's supposed to be empty. Then the smell, cedar, dust, and underneath it, something that doesn't belong in a vacant listing. Something that smells like dinner cooked 2 nights ago. Something that smells like lived in. She has 1 foot over the threshold when she hears it. A child's laugh. High, quick, delighted. Coming from upstairs. Odette freezes with her hand still on the door. Have you ever walked into a moment that looked exactly like the ending you were promised, only to realize, 1 heartbeat too late, that you'd actually walked into the beginning of something else entirely? Stay with me. This one's going to take you somewhere you don't expect. And if stories like this one are why you keep coming back to this channel, the ones that don't just entertain you but sit with you long after the screen goes dark, hit subscribe before we go any further, because I promise you, this journey is going to ask something of you before it's through. Now, let's go back. 10 minutes earlier, before the laugh, before the door, back to the driveway, where Odette still believed she knew exactly what she was walking into. The lake sat under a low October sky the color of a coin nobody wanted, and the house stood above it like something pulled directly out of a memory that wasn't quite Odette's own. She'd parked at the top of the gravel drive 15 minutes ago and hadn't moved. Her hands were steady on the wheel. Her chest wasn't. 3 years of grief had taught her the difference. A knock on the glass. Priya Kapoor, the realtor, stood there with a smile that had been trained into her over a decade of closings, holding out a small brass key on a blue ribbon like it was something ceremonial. You made it, Priya said. Final walkthrough went clean. It's yours, Odette. All yours. Odette stepped out into the cold and looked up. The wraparound porch, the steep cedar-shingled roof, 2 dormer windows tucked beneath the eaves like a pair of eyes that had been waiting for her. She had seen this exact house 100 times before she ever stood on this gravel. She had seen it in pencil, in Desmond's handwriting, in the corner of a napkin sketch he used to keep folded in his wallet like a photograph of someone he loved someday. Lake house, just us. He would have loved this, Odette said, more to the house than to Priya. Your husband? He died before he ever got to build it. The word build caught in her throat, because that was the story she'd told herself for 3 years. That Desmond Farrow, a man who'd drawn 100 versions of his dream house on napkins and blueprints and the backs of gas station receipts, had died with that dream unfinished. That buying this house, a listing that matched his sketches with an accuracy that made her hands shake the first time she saw the photos online, was her way of finishing something for him. Her way of closing a door that had been left open for 3 long years. She hadn't asked herself why a house exactly like his drawings already existed, fully built, sitting on a real lake, waiting for a buyer. She had told herself it was fate. A gift, delivered late. There is a particular kind of hope that grief manufactures out of nothing, the kind that lets a woman stand in a driveway and mistake a coincidence for a message from the dead. Odette had been living inside that hope for 2 years, ever since the listing first appeared in her search results and she'd sat in her car outside her apartment and cried until her mascara ran, because it felt, finally, like Desmond had left her something after all. She thought about the years before this one, the apartment she'd moved into after selling the house she and Desmond had actually shared. Too many rooms holding too many ghosts, she'd told her sister, though the truth was simpler and harder to say out loud. She couldn't stand walking past his side of the closet every morning, still half full of shirts she hadn't been able to give away. She thought about the fertility appointments they'd sat through together, his hand tight around hers in waiting rooms with pastel walls. She thought about the anniversary dinners he used to plan in secret, badly, always forgetting she didn't like cilantro. 11 years of a marriage she would have sworn, under oath, in front of God, that she knew completely. Priya was still talking, something about the inspection report, radon levels, the age of the water heater, but Odette had stopped listening somewhere around the porch steps. She was watching the front door instead, painted the same deep forest green as the one Desmond had circled in red ink on an early sketch, underlined twice, with a note in the margin. This color. Always this color. She hadn't questioned that, either. She slid the key into the lock. The door opened onto a house that smelled of cedar, dust, and something warmer underneath it. Something she wouldn't be able to name until it was already too late to unknow it. That warmth should have been her first warning. She walked in anyway. If you've ever felt like the universe was finally handing you something back after it took so much away, you already know exactly how dangerous that feeling can be. Comment below and tell me, have you ever mistaken a coincidence for a sign? Because Odette is about to learn the difference the hardest way there is. The foyer was swept clean, staged the careful way empty houses get staged for buyers. Except the air was wrong. Too warm for a vacant house in October. Somewhere, a furnace was running that had no business running. Priya, Odette said slowly, is someone still living here? Priya's smile flickered, just barely, gone before Odette could be certain she'd seen it at all. The sellers should have vacated last week. Let me call the office. Then came the sound. A child's laugh, high and quick, footsteps crossing the floor above them. A woman's voice, gentle, scolding, careful, sweetheart, not so close to the stairs. Odette's whole body went cold in a way that had nothing to do with October. Priya, who is that? Before Priya could answer, a woman appeared at the top of the staircase. Late 30s, dark hair pulled into a low knot, wearing a moss-green cardigan, holding the hand of a little girl who couldn't have been older than 6. Behind them, a boy of 12 or 13 stood with his arms crossed, wary, already positioning his body slightly in front of his mother and sister, the way children do when they've learned too young to sense danger before the adults around them will admit to it. The woman froze mid-step. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't think anyone was coming until Thursday. This is my house, Odette said. I closed on it an hour ago. Something complicated moved across the woman's face. Confusion first, then a dawning horror that seemed to hollow her out from the inside. That's not possible. This is our house. Desmond bought it for us 4 years ago. The name landed like a struck bell in a small room. Odette heard her own voice come out very quiet. What did you just say? Nobody moved. The boy on the stairs took another step down, placing himself fully between the two women and his mother and sister now, small chin lifted, fists closed at his sides. Desmond Farrow, the woman said again, softer, watching Odette's face come apart in real time. You knew him. I was married to him, Odette said. 11 years. He died 3 years ago. Heart attack. I buried him myself. The woman, Simone, though Odette wouldn't learn her surname until later, put a hand against the stair rail like the whole house had tilted underneath her. He told me he traveled for work, structural consulting, weeks at a time. He told me his wife died young, cancer, and that he couldn't talk about her without falling apart, so I never pushed. He told you his wife was dead, Odette repeated, tasting every word like something gone rotten in her mouth. He told me you were dead. The silence afterward had actual weight to it, the kind that presses down on the center of the chest and doesn't let up. Odette's eyes moved to the little girl, still holding her mother's hand, watching everything with the frank, unguarded curiosity that only very young children carry into a room. 6 years old, maybe. Dark curls, and unmistakably, almost cruelly, Desmond's exact chin. Desmond's exact eyes. How old is she? Odette asked. It wasn't really a question. 6 in March. Odette did the math without wanting to. 6 years ago, she and Desmond had been trying, quietly and painfully, for a baby of their own. 6 years ago she had cried in a fertility clinic parking lot while he held her and promised her, in the voice she trusted more than any other voice in the world, that they would figure it out together. And him? Odette nodded toward the boy. Micah's 12, Simone said, and something in her voice buckled. Please don't look at him like that. He didn't do anything. None of them did. I didn't know. I swear to you, I did not know. I believe you, Odette said, and found, strangely, that she meant it. There was no performance anywhere in the other woman's face. There was only the same wreckage Odette felt sitting in her own ribs, wearing a different coat. For a moment, nobody moved to fill the silence. Even the furnace seemed to hold its breath. Talia looked back and forth between the two adults with the mild, unbothered confusion of a child who understands that something important is happening, but not yet what. Micah's eyes stayed fixed on Odette, cataloging her, her coat, her car keys still looped around one finger, the way her knuckles had gone white against the door frame, the way boys learn to catalog threats when they've had to grow up faster than they should have. I need you to say his name again, Odette said, very quietly. I need to hear it out loud one more time because some part of me is still hoping I misheard you. Desmond, Simone said. Desmond Farrow, 6'1", terrible singing voice. Used to burn toast on purpose because he liked it that way and pretended it was intentional every single time. Odette's knees nearly gave out on the word, toast. It was such a small, absurd, specific detail. The kind of thing you couldn't invent. The kind of thing only a wife would know. Her own throat closed around the memory of standing in her kitchen 1,000 mornings, watching him do exactly that, laughing at him every time. That's him, she whispered. That's exactly him. 2 women, 1 dead man, 1 house, built from the same sketches he'd shown them both, in 2 entirely different lives, as proof of a love that had apparently never fully belonged to either one of them. This is the moment I want you to sit with for a second, because whatever you think you'd do standing in that foyer, I promise you, you don't actually know until it happens to you. Stick around. What these 2 women choose to do next is going to surprise you. They ended up in the kitchen, because neither woman could stand to keep talking on a staircase where the children could hear every word land. Priya had already excused herself to make some calls, which both women understood without needing to say it aloud, to mean I want absolutely no part of what happens next in this house. Simone made tea that neither of them touched. Her hands shook pouring it, and it was somewhere in the space of that small, useless ritual that Odette finally caught her full name off a stack of mail on the counter. Simone Reyes. He built this house himself, Simone said. Well, hired the crew, but he designed every inch of it. Used to say it was the house he'd dreamed about his whole life, that he'd finally found someone worth building it for. Odette laughed, and it came out broken, nothing close to an actual laugh. He told me the exact same thing, word for word, the house I've dreamed about my whole life. He kept those sketches in his wallet for 11 years. I thought it was the most romantic thing about him. I thought it meant he'd never stop dreaming about a future with me in it. He gave me those same sketches, Simone whispered. I thought I was the one who finally made the dream real. You were the one who made it real, Odette said, and the bitterness in her own voice startled even her. I bought a house today that my dead husband already built for somebody else, with somebody else's children living inside it. Our children, Simone said quietly, not unkindly, just true. Micah didn't ask to be part of this. Neither did Talia. Odette glanced toward the hallway, where she could just make out Micah's shape sitting on the bottom stair, close enough to listen, far enough to pretend he wasn't. 12 years old, old enough to understand exactly what was being said about the shape of his entire life. How often was he here? Odette asked. How often did he leave me to come be with all of you? 2 weeks a month, Simone said. Sometimes 3. He said the consulting work took him all over the state. Bridges, retaining walls, buildings nobody wanted to pay to inspect properly. I used to pack his bags for him. I used to kiss him goodbye at that door and tell him to drive safe. Her voice thinned to almost nothing. I used to miss him. I used to miss him too, Odette said. On the weeks he was gone, I used to sit by the window and wait for his truck to come up the road, and I'd feel this relief, this whole body relief, like I could finally breathe. Again. I thought that was what love felt like. I didn't know I was just missing half a man the whole time, because the other half of him was 200 miles away, missing somebody else. Simone flinched like she'd been struck. Don't say it like that. How am I supposed to say it? I don't know, Simone said, and for the first time her composure cracked all the way open. I don't know how either of us is supposed to say any of this. There isn't a word for what we are to each other. Wives don't share a husband like this. Sisters don't share a father like this. We don't have a name. We're just 2 women standing in a kitchen he built, finding out, at the same time, that we were both being lied to by the same mouth. Odette pressed her palm flat against the cool granite counter, steadying herself against something solid, because nothing else in the room felt solid anymore. I don't know anymore. I thought I knew that man down to the bone. Right now, I don't know what was even true. It was Micah who finally spoke, stepping into the kitchen doorway with the stiff, deliberate courage of a kid forcing himself to be braver than he feels. There's a box, he said, in the office closet. Dad said it wasn't for opening until Talia turns 18. He wrote that on the lid himself. Both women turned toward him at once. You knew where he kept things, Odette said. It wasn't an accusation. It was disbelief that a 12-year-old had apparently known more about his father's private world than she, as his wife, had ever been allowed to know. I used to watch him write in it. He thought I didn't notice. Micah's jaw tightened, working hard to hold something steady. He cried sometimes, when he thought nobody was looking. They found the box exactly where he said it would be. A plain cedar chest, the same cedar as the house's own shingles, as though Desmond had built his confession out of the very same material as his lie. Inside were letters, dozens of them, some addressed to Simone, some to Micah, and one, Odette's stomach dropped the instant she saw the handwriting, addressed simply, "For Odette, if she ever finds out." Her hands trembled opening it. Simone didn't try to read over her shoulder. She stepped back instead and let Odette have that one moment of privacy, which was, in its own strange and unexpected way, the very first act of grace either woman offered the other. "Odette," it read, "if you're reading this, it means I ran out of time to be brave enough to tell you myself. I built 2 lives because I was too much of a coward to end either one. I loved you. That part was never a lie. I love Simone too, and writing that down terrifies me, because I don't understand how both things can be true and I still ended up being such a poor excuse for a man. I'm asking you not to let my mistake become a weapon against people who never chose any of this. Talia and Micah didn't ask to be born into a lie. Please, whatever you end up feeling about me, don't let them be the ones who pay for it." Odette read it twice, then set it down on the counter with hands that had gone completely numb. "He knew," she said. "He knew this exact day would come eventually, and he still didn't stop. That letter changes everything about how this story ends, but not in the way you're expecting. If you've ever had to read someone's true self on a page after believing you already knew them completely, you understand exactly what Odette is feeling right now. We're not even halfway through what these 2 women are about to go through together. Grief has a way of curdling into something sharper once it finally has somewhere to point itself. And for the first time in 3 years, Odette's grief had a face in front of her that wasn't a headstone. "You should have known," she said, and heard exactly how unfair it was even as the words left her mouth. 13 years, Simone. You never once wondered why a man who supposedly lost his wife to cancer didn't have a single photograph of her, never mentioned her family, never once let you meet a friend from his so-called old life? "Don't," Simone said, low and shaking. "Don't you dare stand in my kitchen and tell me I should have caught a lie that took you 11 years of marriage to miss." He was careful, because he loved us both too much to lose either one, and I refuse to apologize to you for being deceived by the exact same man who deceived you first. The words landed like an open hand across the face, mostly because they were true. "This was supposed to be my healing," Odette said, her voice splitting down the middle. "I saved for 2 years to buy this house. I told myself if I could just stand in the one place he'd always dreamed about, I could finally let him go. Instead, I find out the dream was never about me at all. It was about her." She gestured toward the hallway, toward Talia's small shape peeking around the corner. "About all of you." "It was about both of us," Simone said, quieter now, some of the fight already draining out of her voice. "That's the part that's going to haunt me longer than the lie itself. He didn't choose me over you. He never chose at all. He let both of us build entire lives around a man who was never fully present in either one of them. Something in that landed differently than anything said before it. Not comfort. Nothing in this kitchen could offer real comfort yet, but recognition. 2 women, robbed of the exact same thing, in 2 different rooms of the same borrowed life. Neither of them said anything else for a long moment. Outside, the wind moved through the trees at the edge of the property, and somewhere upstairs a door opened and closed softly, a child's cautious footsteps testing whether it was safe yet to come back down. "I keep trying to figure out which one of us he loved more," Odette said finally, staring down at the cold tea in her cup. "Isn't that pathetic? My husband is dead. I just found out he had an entire second life, and the thing my brain keeps circling back to is some ranking, like there's a prize for coming in first in a contest neither of us knew we'd entered." "I do the same thing," Simone admitted. "I lie awake calculating it. Who got the good years? Who got the tired version of him, the short-tempered version, the version who forgot birthdays?" She let out a breath that was almost a laugh, almost a sob. "It's a terrible thing to realize you're grieving a man by doing math." Maybe there's no answer, Odette said. Maybe he didn't love either of us more. Maybe he just loved being loved, and neither of us was ever going to be enough to fill whatever was actually broken in him. Simone didn't argue. She just nodded, slow and tired, and for the first time since the staircase, something between them softened by half a degree. Not friendship, nothing close to it yet, but the beginning of a shared language for a grief that had no name. It was the little girl who finally broke the standoff, the way children sometimes do, without ever meaning to carry that kind of weight on their small shoulders. She walked straight up to Odette, entirely unbothered by the tension still crackling through the kitchen, and held up a crumpled drawing. A house, badly rendered, with far too many windows and a roof that leaned at an impossible angle. A stick-figure family standing out front, all holding hands. "Daddy said this is our house forever," Talia said. "Are you going to make us leave?" Odette knelt down without deciding to, the anger draining out of her knees before it even had the chance to leave her chest. Up close, the resemblance to Desmond was almost unbearable, the same tilt of the head when she was curious about something, the same small gap between her front teeth that Odette used to tease him about across more than a decade of marriage. "I don't know yet, sweetheart," Odette said, and it was the first fully honest thing she'd managed to say all afternoon. "But I promise you, whatever happens, none of this is your fault." Talia studied her with the unnerving directness that only small children seem to possess. "You look sad, like Mommy looks sad." "I am sad, like your mommy," Odette admitted. "Is it because of Daddy?" Odette's eyes filled. "Yes." "He made me sad too sometimes," Talia said matter-of-factly, "when he had to go away, but he always came back." She frowned down at her own drawing. "Except this time. This time he didn't come back." Behind her, Simone made a small, wrecked sound and pressed the back of her hand against her mouth. Odette looked at the drawing, at the crooked little house that was, in its own 6-year-old way, the same house Desmond had drawn for her, the same house. He'd drawn for Simone, and understood, with a clarity sharper than any of the anger before it, that this house had never truly belonged to either woman at all. It had only ever belonged to a version of Desmond that neither of them had actually married. If you have kids in your life who've ever had to carry weight that was never theirs to carry, you already know exactly why this next part matters so much. Because what happens next is going to decide whether this story becomes another wound or something else entirely. 2 days later, Odette drove to the cemetery alone. She hadn't visited in months. The headstone was simple, granite, exactly as she'd chosen it 3 years earlier, Desmond Farrow, beloved husband. And standing over it now, the word beloved felt like something chiseled there under false pretenses. She almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Almost. "I found them," she said to the grave, because talking to a headstone was somehow easier than talking to the empty air around it. "Your other family. Maybe your real one. I don't even know anymore which life was real and which one was just the story you told yourself so you could sleep at night." The wind moved through the cemetery pines, and for a moment Odette let herself feel truly, uncomplicatedly furious. The kind of fury she hadn't allowed herself even in Simone's kitchen, because there, she'd had another woman's pain to manage alongside her own. "You made me spend 2 years saving for a house you'd already built for somebody else," she said. "You let me grieve a man who wasn't even fully mine to grieve. You let a 6-year-old girl grow up believing her daddy just traveled a lot for work." She pressed her palm flat against the cold stone. "But she has your chin," Odette whispered, and her anger finally broke apart into something closer to grief. Clean grief, the kind she should have been allowed 3 years ago, before the lie made even her mourning feel counterfeit. "She has your exact chin, Desmond, and she asked me today if I was going to make her leave the only home she's ever known. And I don't hate her, God help me. I don't hate any of them." A pause. Longer this time. "I hate you." She thought about the eulogy she'd given 3 years ago, standing at a podium in a black dress, telling a room full of people that Desmond Farrow was the most devoted man she'd ever known. She'd meant every word of it then. She wondered now whether devotion could be real and counterfeit at the same time, whether a man could love with his whole chest and still be lying with every breath he took. She thought about the 2 years she'd spent saving for this house, clipping coupons, picking up weekend shifts, telling herself it was an act of love when it had actually been an act of mourning something that had never fully existed. She thought about the version of Desmond she'd built inside her own memory, patient, Loyal, a little forgetful, endlessly kind, and wondered how much of him she'd have to demolish now to make room for the truth. She stood there a long while in the cold, and when she finally walked back toward her car, something in her chest had loosened, not healed, not yet, maybe not for a long time still, but loosened, the way a closed fist finally opens after holding on too tightly for too long. This right here, this is the part of grief nobody warns you about, that sometimes you have to get angrier before you can get free. If this is resonating with something you've lived through, tell me in the comments, because Odette's next decision might be the one that surprises you most. She called Simone that evening. "I'm not selling the house out from under your kids," Odette said, before Simone had even finished saying hello. "I looked into it. Legally, it's mine. His estate went entirely to me. You were never on the deed. I could have you out in 30 days, and no court in this state would stop me." "I know," Simone said quietly. "I've been waiting for that call since the moment you walked through the door. I'm not going to make it." Silence on the line. Then, carefully, "Why not?" "Because he already took 11 years from me that I can't get back," Odette said. "And I refuse to spend the next decade punishing 2 children for his cowardice. That's not justice. That's just more damage, passed along to people who didn't earn it. Somebody in this story has to be the one who finally stops passing it forward." She could hear Simone crying softly on the other end of the line. "I'm putting the house into a trust," Odette continued, steadying her own voice as she said it. "For Micah and Talia, their education, their future, whatever they need, whenever they need it. I don't want to live there myself. I don't think I could stand in that kitchen again without seeing his handwriting on that box. But it shouldn't sit empty either, and it definitely shouldn't be taken away from 2 kids who lost their father on the exact same day I found out I never really had him at all." "Odette," Simone's voice broke around her own name. "You don't owe us any of this. After everything—" "I'm not doing it for you," Odette said, gently but honestly. "I'm doing it for Talia's drawing, for the way she asked me if it was her fault." A pause, and maybe a little bit for myself too. I think I've spent 3 years grieving a man who never deserved the size of that grief. I'd like to spend the next few years doing something that actually means something instead. If you've made it this far, you already know this story could have gone 100 darker directions. Before we get to the ending, if this journey has moved you even a little, share it with somebody who needs to hear that healing and justice aren't always the same choice. Odette returned to the house one final time in early November, when the lake had turned the color of steel and the first frost silvered the porch railing. Simone met her at the door, and this time there was no shock on either woman's face, only the tired, hard-won calm of 2 people who had survived something together, even if neither of them would ever have chosen the other for that particular survival. "Talia wants to show you something," Simone said. In the kitchen, taped to the refrigerator where Odette's own kitchen had once held Desmond's grocery lists and half-finished sketches, was a new drawing. The same lopsided house. But this time, 3 figures stood out front, instead of the family of 4 Talia had drawn before: Simone, Micah, and Talia herself. And off to the side, a little apart from the others but unmistakably included, stood a 4th figure with a small crooked heart drawn above her head. "That's you," Talia announced proudly. "Mommy said you're not our family exactly, but you're not our family either. So I made you the Heart Lady." Odette knelt down and looked at the drawing for a long moment, feeling something in her chest she couldn't fully put a name to. Not forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever completely, but something close to peace, something that finally understood grief and love, could occupy the same house without either one canceling the other out. "I like being the Heart Lady," she said finally, and found that she meant every word of it. She stood, and Simone walked her to the door. "What happens now?" Simone asked. "Between us, I mean. Do we just never speak again?" Odette looked out at the lake through the window, silver and still, holding the reflection of a house that had been built on a beautiful lie and was now, slowly, quietly, becoming something honest instead. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I know I don't want Talia and Micah growing up believing families only come in the shape people expect them to. Maybe that's the one good thing we still have left to give them. Proof that people can be broken by the same person and still choose not to break each other." She stepped out onto the porch, into the cold, bright air, and for the first time in 3 years, walked away from something that had once belonged to Desmond without carrying the full weight of him on her back. Behind her, through the window, She could hear Talia's laughter rising up the staircase, bright, unburdened, already halfway toward becoming a memory that wouldn't be built on a lie. It wasn't the ending Odette had driven up that gravel road looking for. It was, she thought, watching the lake disappear behind her in the rearview mirror, a far better one. If this story reached you today, if it made you think about grace, about the people who never asked to be caught in someone else's mistakes, that's exactly why I make these. Subscribe if you want more journeys like this one, and tell me down in the comments, what would you have done in Odette's place?